we're talking?
No, I don't think I addressed that. I'm not sure how mechanically we're gonna do it. We're looking to Ally for that.
Okay, so which one of you would like to screen share? If we're gonna try the request access, that means one of you would just leave it up, maybe whoever is starting the slides, and then from there, we can have, I'll walk you through it, but John and Corey would request access to your screen, Joan, if you're the one that will be starting.
That's fine. So do I need to go in? I need to pull up our report, the slideshow? Yes, clearly.
Or whoever wants to, I can even do it if that would be helpful. I know you might be able to request access from me, so just whatever the preference is, we'll make it work.
It is in Drive. So, oh, that's right. I downloaded it too, didn't I? Oh, well, too late.
And now you should all be co-hosts, so you should have screen share access, and you'll see that at the bottom of the screen.
Let me figure out how to get it into slideshow mode. Wait, let me get out of this. I'll try it a different way here. John, if you and Corey can be playing with this too, in case I struggle here.
I've
That's
got
fine.
mine.
You got yours up? I made it a slight edit, so
Okay.
let me, okay, I got it in slideshow mode now. I should be good.
Okay.
Okay, so Ally, should I?
You will share screen. So
Right now?
the little green button on the bottom, we'll test. And if you have your PowerPoint pulled up, you'll just share that and then,
Yeah,
let's see.
you see it?
I see it, looks great. Okay, so let me see, I'm not seeing the request access come up, so let me see if it's a setting that we don't have on.
Just checking, yeah, okay.
I got remote control.
Exactly, yeah, that's what you're gonna click from view options, that little button at the top that you should be seeing.
Okay, just approved you, Corey. Doing my wand.
And now is this
John?
moving it?
Yes, that's you. John, you've got to do the same.
Oh, I do. Okay. So do
Yeah,
all
you
of
have to
us?
You have to
have-
advance your own slides.
So all of us have simultaneous access on this. It sounds like.
What, yeah, I think two people can have simultaneous access at once, but what I might recommend is based on the order of the presentations, you might want to just do one at a time
Okay.
based on the order of the slides. And here is Tom.
So John, are you gonna request access while Corey is doing his slides then? Is that what you suggest? So the order, Ally, goes me, Corey, John.
Okay, so yep, Joan, you would just leave it as is, it's your screen, so you can control your own slides. And
Yeah.
then Corey can have access while you're moving your own slides as well. So
Okay.
Corey, if you have access right now, that's perfect. And then John, it's up to you if you want to have access at the same time or wait. It's just a matter of not clicking forward so that you're not moving slides on Joan while she's presenting.
Okay.
Well, can he get access now? Did you say? I thought it was only 2 at a time.
Let's try it. I think it can be 3. I just don't know if that will.
So I just hit
Corey's.
share screen.
Okay,
or-
it's showing Corey that you're requesting again. Did it not go-
I had on request, or I had stopped once we said we might go one at a time, so I'm requesting again.
Okay, I just approved you.
Okay.
And then John, you try to request as well.
And that is by clicking on share screen. Is that how I request?
By view options, there should be a little black button at the top.
Okay. Yes, I see that. Okay, view.
And then request remote control.
Okay, then request remote control. Okay, request.
Yep, I just got the approve or decline. I
Okay,
just approved you.
Okay,
So you can test it out, John, see if this is working for you and try to move the slide.
so like if I click on it, it will, it looks like it moved, yes. Okay,
Okay.
all right,
And then Corey, can you test and just try to move? Let's see if this will do it with all three.
that is interesting.
No, I think maybe when John got approved, I went back to green, not yellow, saying I'm viewing the screen, not.
Okay, so it is only 2 at a time then. So
Okay.
what I'll ask is that Corey, you ask again, and then John will just have to request once it's your
Mhm.
turn with your slides.
Okay,
Or he should be able to ask while Corey's presenting, right?
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly. So
No, actually, I think that would kick me off. I think it's important that
That's
John wait until,
Because I'm the first one, because it's showing my screen, so it's gotta be me and Corey and me and John, it sounds like.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so John, when you're ready, you're gonna have to request
yes,
control, okay?
okay.
Okay,
Hi, Tom.
so, hey, Tom.
Hello.
Working through the tweaks of the PowerPoint, just figuring out share screen and remote access, which we have it figured out now. And if anything funky happens, I have the slides too, so I can always pull them up, but we should be pretty all set here. Video and sound is good for everyone, so we are set there. Let's see. We had, I think, just over 60 registered as of today, so that's pretty decent for our level of turnout. We'll see how many actually end up attending. It's usually, I'd say, about 75% of who registers. All right. Any questions before we get started? We have about 6 minutes before I open up the room.
Is it okay if I leave the face view on the right side of my screen for you guys?
Mhm.
Or would you prefer I get rid of the pictures of the people?
The
Because
pictures
since
are
I'm
fine.
sharing my screen, I just want to make sure you guys are comfortable with what I've got.
So you're just sharing your slides, so it's perfect. We can't see the
Oh,
people
okay.
that you're
Okay.
Yep, we'll see those on our own screen.
Got it. I never knew how that worked. There we go, good. But I like seeing people, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you should be able to see, well, you just said you can, so that's good. But everyone will be joining and have the option to have camera on, so that will be nice.
Yeah.
Okay, does it feel comfortable with the slides and the remote access? Any final questions about that, or do we feel like we're good on that?
I think we're good.
I think we're good, as long as, John, you just remember to request of controls when it's your turn.
Yes, absolutely.
So Tom will be moderating. He'll do just a quick kind of introduction. He will introduce you, Joan, and then he will ask that you introduce Corey and John. Get it handed over to you pretty quickly. At the end, I just need a couple of minutes to insert a brief survey that we do. But other than that, the plan is pretty simple.
Great.
Mhm.
Anything to add, Tom?
No, that sounds right. And I'll kind of work at getting control of the meeting at the end so that we can, stop on time, so that we have a little bit of time for Ally. And we want to be able to thank you too for speaking today. So I usually break in and do something around that. Everybody, please, thank them.
Yeah, we'll be
Sure.
looking out for any questions that come through, so Tom and I will have those ready for you. What I'll say is when you open it up for Q&A and discussion, maybe stop sharing your slides so that you'll just see everyone and
Yeah, that's good. I don't remember to do that, just somebody jump in and tell me.
yeah, I'll send a reminder. Okay, we're starting to get some in the waiting room, that's good.
And Corey and John, the way it's set up, and for you to know too, I kind of introduce you guys on the second slide. I can shift it around, however. This is good practice run for next week too, Ally.
Yes. And I haven't even looked at registration for that yet, but I will.
Holly
I'll
told
follow-
me, now Holly told me after the first email blast, it was about 110.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's probably gone up from there. We've sent out a second blast since, and we also posted on LinkedIn. And that's been getting shared pretty widely, so we should have pretty good turnout for that one as well. We just have a larger listserv at the College for Behavioral Health Leadership. We have a listserv of about 5,000, where for the Lunch and Learns, we have under 300.
Okay.
Good
That's,
though.
is
Yeah, that
you-
little video that Scott Light put together was great.
for
Ally,
sure.
are you ready to advertise that one at the end of the meeting too today? Like if I say, you know, turning it over to Ally, she's gonna tell you about the upcoming one that you're doing.
Yep, I can let them know about the one that we'll be having with CBHL.
Sounds good. So just plan.
Full disclosure, it'll be pretty similar to this one, just with the different presenters. And actually, it'll be modified for that one, more for a national view. And also, we're gonna share some learnings in that one. So Tracy Maxwell Hurd has got a slide, she's gonna be sharing learnings. And then Tracy Plout will be looking at policy opportunities.
Okay, and we're 1 minute before the hour, so I will start letting folks into the waiting room, just so we are all aware of that. Welcome, everyone. Welcome as you are joining. Just gonna give it another couple of moments. We're about 1 minute before the hour, so we'll be getting started shortly. And while we are here waiting a few moments for others to join, it would be great to know who is in the room. So please feel free in the chat to type your name and where you are from. What is your organization? Welcome, Anne.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi there, Monica. Just gonna give it about another minute or so folks have enough time to shift over from other meetings they might have been in. And if you missed my ask in the beginning, you'll see some introductions coming in through chat. We'd love to know who's in the room, so please feel free to enter that into chat. Okay, we're about a minute over the hour, so Tom, I think I will hand it off to you. Let me just hit record and then let's get started.
Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone, to the Clear Pathways Ohio Collaborative Lunch and Learn. These monthly meetings are for us to take a closer look at various topics related to the crisis response continuum. I am Tom Craig, your host today. I am the Director of Mental Health Program at PEGS Foundation and with the Clear Pathways Initiative. Lunch and Learns this year will focus on measurement and metrics that are important in the crisis response services. Today, we will learn about a collaborative effort to produce a series of reports generated by the Mental Health Addiction Advocacy Coalition in partnership with Central State University, Ohio University, and Multi-Ethnic Advocates for Cultural Evidence. This series is entitled Behavioral Health in Ohio, improving data, moving towards racial and ethnic equality. It outlines the need for more comprehensive behavioral health data describing the experiences of marginalized racial and ethnic groups. And it also shares the data that demonstrates the current behavioral health workforce and that it does not reflect the racial and ethnic diversity of Ohio's population. We will hear thoughts on the implications of this study and recommendations for the future. I'd like to introduce Joan England, who is the Executive Director of the Mental Health and Addiction Advocacy Coalition. She has advocated extensively at the local and state levels regarding behavioral health public policy issues. Joan will introduce her colleagues who are with us today, and they will share potential implications on the crisis response continuum in Ohio. Joan?
Thanks, I appreciate the introduction, and we are thrilled to be here talking with all of you today about our series of reports, Behavioral Health in Ohio, Improving Data, Moving Towards Racial and Ethnic Equity. This project has been over 2 years in the making, actually, and it brings together what is a really unique partnership. You'll see the 4 partner organizations at the bottom, and Tom also mentioned them. Each of these organizations brings their own unique perspective and their own unique expertise to this project, and it's one of the things that has made it so successful to date. The first organization I want to highlight is Multi-Ethnic Advocates for Cultural Competence. Like their name implies, they work in cultural competency. That's their primary focus. And for almost 20 years now, they've really looked at cultural competence in regard to behavioral health. They are moving now beyond behavioral health into other sectors, but they bring that expertise and cultural competence to this project. Next, we have Ohio University, and they've brought their research institute to the table. So we have the firepower of their research institute, and also Tracy Plout, who many of you know was the former Medicaid director twice and director of Ohio MOS, is also part of their team, in addition to Dr. Corey Cronin, who's joining us today. We also have my organization that we run, the Mental Health and Addiction Advocacy Coalition. We are now celebrating our 20th year as well. For 20 years, we've been involved in local and state level policy and advocacy work. And finally, I want to lift up, and I would say, in due deference to all of the rest of us on this team, our most important partner is Central State University. As some of you may know, Ohio has 2 HBCUs in our state. Central State University is the public HBCU. So they not only bring the fire and John's clinical experience, they bring the invaluable perspective and experience and viewpoint of an HBCU. Trying to advance my slides here. There we go. Our collaborative team that's going to talk to you today is Dr. Corey Cronin from Ohio University, Dr. John Trout from Central State University, and myself. These are the funders supporting this project. You'll see the funders who provided dedicated funding for this work. I should also note that PEGS Foundation has been a tremendous partner of the MAC through the years and actually provides operating support so that we can do these types of things in addition to the rest of our policy and advocacy work, and we're incredibly grateful. You'll also see that report 1 of our series of reports was released on January 18. Report 2 was released on February 21. I'm going to lift up some of the highlights related to report 1, and Corey's going to talk to you about report 2 and then briefly provide some highlights for reports 3 and 4. So the big question of why did we do this? And we all know that there are inequities in the behavioral health system in Ohio. But what's missing is any data on the inequities, any analysis of that data, and any public-facing compilation of that data. We know the inequities exist, but what are they? And where are they? And how do we gauge our work moving forward? How do we know that we are investing our energy, our dollars, our times in the right areas? The example that I throw out on a regular basis relates to workforce. So for almost 20 years now, I've been saying that our workforce doesn't reflect the diversity of Ohioans. And I think everybody that I say that to that's involved in the space knows intrinsically that is true. But nobody can tell you which workforce are we talking about. Are we talking about social workers? Are we talking about pharmacists? Are we talking about physicians? And if we're talking about social workers, are we talking about LSW? Are we talking about LISW? Is there a difference? And how does it look in urban environments versus rural environments? None of that data was compiled, analyzed, and put public facing. We've now done that and are continuing to do it throughout the rest of this year and potentially beyond. We've looked at that data and provided that public facing initiatives, for example, that we're working on right now. In 10 years, we'll be able to know whether we've made a difference because we now have baseline data. We didn't have that baseline data before. So how are we going to know whether our initiatives were successful and successful in the right places? So report number 1 was an overview. We knew we had to level set. Probably all of us on this call understand what a social determinant of health is, what systemic racism means and the implications of it. But we wanted to make sure that everybody who picked up this report, number 1, was curious and continued to read it, not only the first one, but the reports later on, but that everybody had a common understanding of some of the baseline issues that were there. Overview number 1, report number 1 provides an overview including data that are needed and currently not available. We found that for years in all of our research report. We may need data, we do need certain data, but it doesn't exist. And candidly, the lack of data makes it incredibly convenient to not do the right things. And it's an easy out for some to say we can't do anything about it because we don't have any data that really shows what the problem is and where the problem exists in the state of Ohio. So we call that out. We own that. We own where there is not data and where data needs to exist. We also in report 1 include a series of recommendations to help inform initiatives moving forward. We also know that national research shows that marginalized people face barriers to care, and these include access to culturally competent care and provider racial bias. It also includes stigma. We also importantly know that racially and ethnically conservatives associate with better outcomes. This stat that we have in the report is sobering. For the whole population of Ohio, from 2010 to 2020, there was an increase in the age-adjusted death rate for suicide of, my picture is blocking it here, 14%. For non-Hispanic Black Ohioans, during that same period of time, 2010 to 2020, there was an alarming 87.3% increase during that same interval. 14% versus 87.3%. We also know that Black non-Hispanic males now have the highest drug overdose death rate in Ohio compared with other sex and racial and ethnic groups. And you'll see on this chart where that happened. Just about a little shy, about in between 18 and 19, that's when the Black non-Hispanic unintentional drug overdose death rate surpassed all others in Ohio. So these are the types of things that we talk about in report 1. I'm now going to kick it over to Corey, who's going to talk about report 2 and then briefly talk about 3 and 4. Corey?
Thank you, Joan. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. So happy to be with you today talking about our work, and I get the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the data that Joan was describing and want to begin a little bit with our process of seeking data, because I think that's been an important learning point for us that we're trying to pass along in these reports. And so the data that I'm going to talk to you today, looking at racial and ethnic composition of Ohio's behavioral health workforce, really we set out our goal was again to look at the workforce characteristics as compared to state of Ohio, but going much more local we knew was important. And so rather than doing a broad state overview, could we look per county? Could we look at zip code? And there lies some challenges that we ran into. But we were able to work with the different boards that license professionals in the state. It's important to say, in no way do we believe we've reached an exhaustive list of every type of professional who works in mental behavioral health space, but we think we've hit some of the larger ones. We also know some of the groups that we are going to report here and work with do much beyond mental and behavioral health, but we do believe they're an important part of this workforce and worth considering. And so some of the things I'm going to talk to you about have to do with reporting by professionals through these licensing boards when it comes to race and ethnicity. And one of the things we found is you're going to see on race in particular, pretty high reporting rates. That's what I walked through. Even though the rates are pretty high, there were challenges that much of this is self-reported data. And the way that different licensing boards get at this really caused for some pretty crude categories. A lot of it was writing in answers, for example, rather than any kind of standardized form. One specific challenge that I find interesting is whether a licensing board was collecting a home address or a workplace address. And so that made it challenging when we're considering this to needs in Ohio and different populations, that we may actually have somebody reporting their home address and not necessarily in the county or zip code that they work or where their services are being utilized. But let me get into some of the results from this data that we collected. And again, our main goal was looking at race, ethnicity, gender, as it went to those working in the healthcare field, and then bringing that back as a reference to Ohio demographics in different areas. And so some of our high level findings here in report 2, looking at the workforce, when we look at social work, for example, and some of the things that it takes to be a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, passing exams, white test takers had a pass rate of 84% compared to black test takers at 45%, hitting to areas of education, training, and opportunities. When we look at Ohio overall, we know that about 13% of our population identify as Black alone, about 4% Hispanic alone. However, when we look to psychologists in the state, only about 5% of psychologists are Black and about 3% are Hispanic. So again, kind of taking a relative look to what makes up the population of Ohio compared to these licensed professional workforces. Only about 5% of physicians within the state are Black and 3% Hispanic. And the vast majority of pharmacists, 87%, are white within the state. Many professions have educational requirements that are increasing. And when we look at underrepresentation, we're seeing even greater gradients of underrepresentations when it comes to Black professionals compared to white counterparts. And so when we look at these statistics, again, some confidence in our statistics is going to come from the next series of slides where we break things down by different types of professionals, their licensing bodies, and the reporting of race and ethnicity. But I do want to highlight some differences that you'll see in these courses. And so here, we're taking a look first, starting with Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapist Board. And we see that there is good data on race for this type of working professional, that 100% of the licensing data contains self-reported race. And here we also have very good, and you'll see comparatively, very good reporting of ethnicity, that the way that this licensing board collects data, about 98% of those licensed professionals were able to provide data on their ethnicity. When we look at the Ohio State Medical Board and physicians, we see 96% have self-reported race. However, ethnicity was collected separate and the data were not able to be provided to us at this time. So we were only able to consider race. The Ohio Board of Psychology, again, very good. 99% of licensees self-reported race, and we have about 99% here also self-reporting ethnicity. Looking at Ohio chemical dependency professionals, we have nearly all reporting self-reported race and 93% reporting on ethnicity. And here you can see some of those who work within this profession and what the education requirement is for that licensing. When we come to the final ones, the State Ohio Board of Pharmacy, we've got about 98% self-reporting on race, but ethnicity is not collected at all. For the Board of Nursing, similarly, almost entirely reported on race, but nothing on ethnicity that is collected separately and not data that was available. And for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, 100% of those certified did self-report race. That data is available, and we were able to obtain it, but ethnicity was not collected and not able to be considered. So bringing all of this together, we have a table in our report, and I see that somebody in chat put where the reports are available, and thank you for that. I do think some of these tables are worth spending time with, especially if you have an interest in the area that you work in, a particular workforce, or comparing the workforce. But here you can see our reported numbers. In the report as well, we provide a look at a county level, like I said before, a look at a county level for the overall state of Ohio demographics, and then by each professional type, we can look at a county level racial and ethnic breakdowns. But what I want to call your attention to here, we're looking at the same type of professionals working in mental behavioral health, and the column all the way to the right actually shows the proportion of zip codes in the state that have no representation. And so we're really looking at issues here of access and how far people may need to travel for different services. And so we can see how things are spread and where there are real gaps in the state in these services. And so here we have social work, physicians, psychology, and chemical dependency. And we can round things out with prevention specialist, pharmacy, nursing, peer support specialist, and the last row of the spreadsheet is looking at Ohio overall as a reference group. So with this data, looking at workforce, as Joan said, we are excited about the projects we're working on now and the reports that you'll see coming out soon. Report 3 is underway right now as far as analysis goes. And report 3, now that we've kind of have an understanding of workforce and ideas there, report 3 takes us in the direction of who has a need for services, who is waiting for services, who is seeking services, and then who is ultimately getting services in these areas. And so key there actually is who is not getting services in different parts of the state of Ohio, because one of our strengths, we believe, is looking more locally than just at state data, but going as local as we can, whether that be county or zip code, and data somewhat limits our ability with how local we can get, but we're getting as local as we can to see parts of the state, and especially along those lines of who is seeking care, finding gaps between who's seeking care and who's able to obtain care around these services in the state. And so that'll be coming out in report 3. And report 4 is looking at how funding is distributed through the state and really what opportunities there are in these areas for funding and how we could strengthen this and make recommendations. All right. And now, speaking of recommendations, that's a good transition to my colleague John, who is going to speak to you today about recommendations from the work that we've been able to do. So let me hand over.
Thank you, Corey. making sure I have the screen control. And yes, my name is John Trouth. I've been a social worker in the state of Ohio for 21 years now, and definitely amazing to see some of this stuff come to light as I witnessed it in the field, especially back in 01, 02, and 03. Didn't know where to make sense of or how to begin making sense of anything. And then a couple years ago, with Joan inviting us to this project, seeing all the data that would go into it and then bringing real life experience to come together has been quite an adventure. And so we had 6 areas with action needed with our several sets of reports. And I'll go through all of these here. One was being improve the engagement of BIPOC communities in planning and decision making. So getting in with the different boards and doing interviews and speaking with the workers, getting down to grassroots on the ground, folks that are doing the work, and just hearing about their experiences and helping that with the decision making. 2 in yellow, as you see, was to collect and use the data to understand the behavioral health workforce needs related to race and ethnicity. And we'll see a lot of that coming out. And report 3 and finding the main areas where there are needs across Ohio, where there's high need, and then even as far into the rural areas where we still know there's need, it just might be a different percentage of need. 3 in the orange, we wanted to conduct statewide workforce planning and programming in a way that facilitates diversity, equity, and inclusion in behavioral health. About a month and a half ago, the governor invited all of us to Columbus to have a say in what's going on with some of the data, how that's coming out, what that looks like for our agencies, and how we can better serve the communities that we're working with. And we saw it as just a beginning of the conversation, but having a continual dialogue going, not just throughout this year and next, but ongoing. And then using that info to find out in 4 in the red how we can improve recruitment, retention, and advancement of BIPOC professionals by creating a more culturally inclusive workspace. I did 7 years at Lighthouse Youth Services and 4 years at Ohio Mentor. And we had some of the different trainings. Some were diversity trainings. We had a couple multicultural trainings. And in light of the new and recent news that is coming out, how can we better gear our workforce towards the communities we serve? How can we serve individuals better with the data that we're finding? And then 5, you see at the bottom in the middle, align behavioral health workforce efforts across the state, agencies, and all of the relevant partners. And then 6, where educators, especially at Central State University, we see this establishing a pipeline for future BIPOC workers and training with our social work program. We recently went through reaccreditation and is a little bit more diverse than where I've taught before at Miami University and University of Cincinnati, to give them access to have a 1-year master's degree to apply to an advanced standing MSW and get out into the workforce. So some of the recommendations for Ohio's crisis continuum, we had a few here. So on workforce recommendation 1, to improve engagement of BIPOC communities in planning and decision making. So to engage BIPOC stakeholders, develop community-centered, culturally competent outreach initiatives. And 2 of those is just with the system of care, with the crisis response system, just knowing that it won't be used if people don't feel welcome and comfortable to engage. I'm thinking of when I had to do on-call overnight and had different situations come up that I could tell as white cisgender male that sometimes I didn't have the background and experience, and occasionally no training could bring that to answer some of the questions that were coming across that made me feel shorthanded. So if we can enhance those multicultural trainings or even have more folks than the 4 to 6% that would be more representative of the 13% African American and the Hispanic population and the different race and ethnicities that we see and serve. Like, how can we serve them better? Community-informed messaging and how that increases salience among members of the targeted population. Considering local champions when convening groups for engagement. So making sure that, I know with Lighthouse, we stretched out over into the Athens side of the state and as far north as the Dayton side of the state, that with a big agency, knowing that we have a training specific to maybe Appalachian population in Athens County, or the mix of folks that we would see in Dayton, and making sure that we bring them to the table and they have a voice at the table. With workforce recommendation 2, we wanted to put out some questions to you all, and I know that we're wanting to leave the end for more questions, but collect and use the data to understand the behavioral health workforce needs related to race and ethnicity. And the first several months of work on this helped us get a clear understanding. Here we show clear pathways, emphasizes data-informed decision-making as local interventions are established or strengthened. Maybe there's another intervention we would like to add and consider for the different populations in different areas. Some example questions to consider, like how does race and ethnicity of individuals presenting in crisis compare to the overall community demographics? And you can answer these in the chat or ask more follow-up questions when we do the second half with questions. Also, for those engaging in the crisis continuum, what do you all see? Does the follow-up vary by race and ethnicity? Do you have someone come in for an assessment and they don't do a follow-up meeting to finish their treatment plan goals or do the treatment plan whatsoever because they didn't feel a connection, because they didn't feel, the rapport was not built with possible lack of multicultural training, or just like they didn't connect with the individual? And then finally, how does the local provider race and ethnicity compare to those receiving crisis care? And again, feel free to answer those in the chat or afterwards to have follow-up questions with our last 2 recommendations. So on 4, we had to improve recruitment, retention, and advancement of BIPOC professionals by creating a more culturally inclusive workplace. So as those of you that have worked in the field, and I did crisis care for several years, we know it's difficult and complex work. And it includes vicarious trauma. Like, there's a lot of things needed to properly do self-care and to know how to work with a lot of the challenges that come with crisis work. So having a universally supportive network and environment is key. Having folks that are trained that can help provide that supportive environment is key. Also, with local intersystems to identify current areas of strength, knowing where we do a good multicultural training and diversity training, and knowing how we can make it better if needed. And sometimes that will come with consulting your workforce. So asking the people that are boots on the ground, seeing the individuals and seeing what's coming up. For example, the opioid epidemic that we'd seen go on intensively for many years, and then seeing the spike in African American deaths in the past 2, 3, and 4 years, knowing what's going on, boots on the ground. Also connecting with mentors from other communities who have led progress in the area. I speak from agencies I've worked for before, but we would make sure to go from Lighthouse over to Cincinnati Children's Hospital to hear what some of those first responders were seeing and getting before they referred clients onto us after the initial crisis was over. And then also to identify specific opportunities for improvement and establish time-limited measurable goals. I know on a grant we worked on this spring with Miami University, we landed $4.9 million for scholarships from HBCU graduates, including Central State, Wilberforce, and then even other states, that they can finish their Master of Social Work at Miami University with 70% of the tuition covered. So it's only about $8,000 instead of $24,000 a year. And that was a huge grant that we just got info on in the past month. Identify specific opportunities for improvement. And then evaluating the progress. And, you know, we always have follow-ups with a lot of these grants, and it's important to show some of the things we're measuring. And I like what Joan had said about having a baseline to start with, because we didn't have that before, and we can't evaluate anything if we don't know that baseline to begin with. So last slide is establishing a pipeline for the future BIPOC workers, and that goes to the Miami University Scholarship. We've worked with the University of Cincinnati to have our students, that was another grant, to have a fully funded weekend where the UC chartered a bus, showed their MSW program, and took our students around and showed them the opportunities to get the MSW. Because we're fully accredited, they have the chance to get an independent license opportunity by getting their Masters of Social Work. So that was one example of our pipelines here. So considering local crisis continuum, what types of workforce augmentation is needed in order to be more reflective of the demographics of individuals receiving services. And some of the data we saw that for social workers, the matchup was pretty good for BSW, LSW for your license in social work. However, when it came to the LISW, that's where we saw some of the disparities, where it was the smaller single-digit percentages that were showing up. They got their independent license, and how can we do different trainings and even help with the test that has been given and showing the disparities there. Last piece here, what existing partnerships might be leveraged to expose potential workers and opportunities. We've got intersector practicum and field placements. Nikita is our field director here, and she does really tailor to our students what the field placement would look like, so they don't experience burnout before they get into the field as a practitioner. They can have a learnable experience as a student and not quit social work before they get the license. Also, affinity building presentations by clinicians and paraprofessionals with K through 12 college students. And some of those we've done locally here in Wilberforce and also in Lebanon. The community first aid and community mental health, where we go into the schools and let them know what a counselor is, what a social worker does, and the different things there. And then also just using traditional social media. So we're trying to get more out there to get the information across. So I'm going to turn it over again now to Joan and anybody who has questions. Right on time. I guess we're a few minutes over.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Thank you, Corey. Tom, I'll turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing, and then I'll turn it over to you, or Allie, or whoever's facilitating the Q&A.
No, I was wondering if you had, as you were developing some of this data, seen any or crosswalked any of the effects of COVID, and also I wondered about health as well. Is telehealth penetrating into the BIPOC communities better, or is it a barrier of not having internet and other kinds of things like that? Were you able to see any of those kinds of intervening variables in this process?
Corey, do you want to take that as one of the data team members?
Yes, and COVID's been a challenge for our data approach, and it will be more of the work in the next report on treatment and access. And so we certainly know that there is an interaction between behavioral mental health and COVID. For that reason, much of our data request is actually 2019 data that, again, in way of establishing a baseline, when we have this opportunity to do this report, we wanted at least some of the numbers and data to be pre-COVID. That would then allow us to do, future work that looked at from that baseline, what were COVID effects, et cetera, or since then. And also to your question about telebehavioral health or mental health, that too will be in treatment. As far as things go, we did not get from the workforce, from the provider perspective of those things, because we were working with licensing board data. None of this was qualitative in nature or asking people in what way they provided services. And so I think on both of your pieces, it's certainly considerations, but things to come in the future. And good points.
I was wondering if you were creating any kind of tools that communities could use as they take these data sets and use them as discussion starters. Like, for instance, would you be able to provide maybe a simple guidance in how to take a look at a set of data and then problem solve around it, or use it as a launching pad for important discussions that you'd like to see happen. And I think some of it was mentioned already with some of the ways that this data could be used at a university to develop workforce, but were there other ways that these tools could be used, especially if we have a lot of crisis continuum groups meeting and discussing how to make their crisis continuum more effective?
Those are great questions, Tom. I will say there is so much more work to be done, and we fully recognize that there's a lot that can be done with what we've put out there, and that there is so much more to do beyond what we've done. And I think this is a great example. And that's so directly to your answer, no, we haven't created any of those tools or kind of those next step type things. We've been narrowly focused on the data that we're collecting and laying down baselines. You will see, though, in our series of recommendations, a number of recommendations regarding, now this is what needs to be done. That's a great example. And I will share with all of you that we are currently in discussion among this, incredible team that we've pulled together, discussions about a possible phase 2. So what's next, right? And so all 4 entities are actively at the table talking about the what's next and where can we be most effective. And honestly, there's just a ton of stuff we could all be doing. And we've also been very candid about the fact that our 4 entities aren't going to be able to do it all. There's a lot of work for others to come to the table and to join us in. But this question of implementation and what that might mean and next steps is something that we are actively discussing. But there is no plan to do exactly that over the next 6 months. That would be a January 2024 and moving forward thing for us.
Thank you. Allie, are there any questions in the chat?
We did have a question that just came through chat, and that is, how do the reports take into consideration the biases of individuals compiling and studying and collecting the data and reports?
Corey is one of our data team. Do you want to take a start with that one?
With the data shared today, it's an interesting question, and also something as a team we're very deliberate about, because even when we're picking up data from other places, we're adding our own potential layer in how we use the data, look at it, report out on it. And so that's why this partnership model and the teamwork constructed has been so important to us. For the data today, the self-reported nature of it is interesting. It's challenging. As I mentioned before, it's not, as somebody who works with data, check boxes and predefined categories would make my job a lot easier. Instead of people reporting how they want, what they want, sometimes multiple identities. But that's actually great to the question you're talking about, that as long as the licensing boards are collecting data in that way and then making that the official data set, that's the data we have to use and go on. Joan, anything to add? You might have a perspective on the question.
Yeah, a couple of different things. I mean, as to our own biases as team members, we agreed very early on to put pretty much everything on the table and have had some very honest, enlightening / challenging conversations over the period of a year. And that's just been the nature of our processes. Again, having an HBCU at the table, having multi-ethnic advocates for cultural competence, and we're all bringing our unique perspectives, and we're all recognizing our own biases that we have, and trying, I'll speak for our team, we're trying as hard as we can to learn from our teammates, whether it's about research, whether it's about cultural competence, whether you name it. And I think I can say that all of us on the team are actively trying to do that. But it's, it is something that we're cognizant of, but we need to be cognizant of it on a daily basis. When it comes to our recommendations, we've also had some very interesting conversations about the limitations of the data. Race and ethnicity don't include nearly all the input. So when someone has to check a box by meaning Black, what does that mean? Are they Nigerian? Are they from another country? What is baked into our definitions and our categories of race? And they are very limited in what we have right now. One of the other places, and as an example that it's come up, is we had the discussion about asking that the licensing boards require that everyone disclose race and ethnicity. We would also argue for languages spoken, for example. But what does that mean if you require someone to disclose their race? What if they are multiracial? What if they don't know what their race is? What if they have concerns about bias from their local communities if they do disclose their race? So those are all the kinds of conversations we've had, particularly when it comes to developing recommendations. And what would this actually mean for Ohioans if this recommendation, for example, was implemented?
Joan, I'll only add, because as you were speaking, the role of an advisory board for the work we're doing at our group is also important. It's been a challenge, honestly, to get it going and get participation, but the concept and what we're committed to, and you'll see advisory boards in many of our recommendations, is that it wouldn't just be our group influencing this work, and that there would be a group advising, giving feedback and input and helping point in directions that we should be going.
Thinking about this challenge that you had of finding the data and the data buckets, where do they exist? And wondering also, especially as we start to look at crisis and the crisis elements, what kinds of data should we be collecting that would be helpful in order to make wise decisions, or decisions that would really add value to the work that we're doing. And even asking your question, are you Black, when a person is in crisis, can be quite it can be scary for that person to answer that question, not always knowing the implications of what they reveal and the confidentiality nature of all of those things. But I was wondering if you, as you were looking around for data buckets or data sources and finding them to be a bit thin, what would you like to see happen, or what recommendations, and beyond having a committee that sort of might look at that as well, do you have of easy wins that we could create for data?
Then on that, you covered a few of those things in your recommendations that you covered.
Do you mind rephrasing the question just a little bit? So what can we change or do to make better or serve better? Is that kind of where you're going, or?
I would like to just know, one of the things that a lot of people on this call do is create opportunities for better data, richer data. And if we are creating systems where we're collecting stuff, or we're saying, hey, this is a question we should be asking in our data set. What areas might we consider doing that in, and how do we prioritize? Because a lot of times you don't want to be asking stuff that's not necessary, especially when someone's in crisis.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm recalling, maybe you all do this at your different agencies already, but for example, at Lighthouse is the most recent agency I worked at that did some of the crisis things, giving them the opportunity to anonymously give feedback about our services on a tablet or device, or even something that we give them. I think a lot of agencies are picking up on that, but making it open-ended where they could give specific requests of how they could be better served or how good they were served. It doesn't always have to be about bad things, but like I appreciated and seemed like how this was handled, and what the assessment looks like and the questions that were asked on the assessment and things of that nature. I'm hoping that gives some of an answer to your example. Is that kind of the route that you were looking for?
No, that is helpful. And maybe there's some questions in the audience here. Does anybody have a question around some of those things, practical ways to collect data or other things like that?
Tom, one of the things that's been raised is that some of this is going to take some time, right? If you're talking to K through 12 kids about the value proposition for coming into these fields, it's going to take a minute for them to graduate from high school, go through college, potentially get their master's. So in the meantime, in addition to other recruitment and retention activities, what can we be doing? And the value of cultural competence training for those of us that are not BIPOC, for example, can't be underestimated. So looking at how are your staff regularly trained in cultural competence? How often are they trained? How often are they retrained? So thinking about, some of the scenarios that John was talking about in those recommendations, that could be a data point that could be taken a look at right now to help address what we know is a problem. Can we increase the level of cultural competence for our staff? John, I just pulled out some of the recommendations that you've been talking about, looking again, making sure that you constantly have the data on and are aware, and that everyone is aware of the numbers of the race and ethnicity of those presenting to the crisis system and those providing the services. And then again, to that data point again, really looking at the crisis continuum, and we know it's a continuum. It's not just a discrete moment or a discrete service. Across the entire continuum of crisis services, looking at the professionals that are needed to provide the services across the entire continuum, and assessing where we are from a workforce perspective, and then gauging that against where we need to be to support an adequate and comprehensive continuum around the state, and then looking at those data sets. What are we missing? Do we need more LSWs in this community versus LISWs in this community? And then implementing active strategies to address those gaps from a racial and ethnic perspective, for example, would be another, I would think, really excellent data collection. Again, because then you've got some baselines, recognizing professionals change and those kinds of things, but you've got some then benchmarks for crisis services in those communities, because we didn't do that. We haven't dug down into that level of analysis.
So Joan, right now you're in the middle of this series of reports, and you're starting to roll them out and talk to people about them. And we think it's, when I first read it, I thought, wow, this stuff, that we're doing here in Ohio with this data is really stuff that should be shared even wider and nationally. And so I know that you're going to be doing that. But has there been any early surprises or any early encouraging things that have happened as you've started to share this information with people around the state? And I just think that would be interesting to know whether or not it's causing already people to change the way they do things or initiating more conversation around this.
I think it is initiating more conversation, Tom, and I appreciate you asking that. You know, in some corners of this state, these kinds of conversations aren't readily had. And by pushing this envelope and encouraging curiosity and engagement in this space, we're seeing more and more people kind of come to the table and want to have these discussions, want to learn more about the research, want to know what they can be doing. To your question right before, like, what can we be doing? And as I said a little while ago, and we all actively on the team embrace this, there's a lot of work to be done in this space. Our 4 partners can't do it all. Did we want to go down a bazillion different other avenues of research? Oh my gosh, you should have seen some of these conversations. You know, we wanted to look at criminal justice. We wanted to do, you know, all of these different things. So we had to rein ourselves back on a regular basis to say, okay, here's our lane. We have to stay in our lane and really fight hard to do that. So I think that we're excited that there is excitement about this project because there is so much work to be done in this space. And we're seeing excitement at the local levels. We're seeing excitement at the state level. And we're now seeing excitement at the national level as well. And next week, we have the incredible privilege of speaking with the College for Behavioral Health Leadership, which includes national members. We have the ability, or we're excited to be a guest presenter for a webinar with them. So the word about this report is going to go out even broader. And I will say that we have also shared this work with the U.S. Surgeon General and gotten these reports out in front of him. And we're excited about that opportunity as well as along with some leaders at SAMHSA. So we're excited about that. We see this as, you know, potentially providing we say humbly, an opportunity for other states if they haven't looked at this. We provide the templates. And I will say one of the things that we're going to be talking about next week with the College for Behavioral Health Leadership are some of the learnings associated with this work.
Thank you. I would ask everyone, if they would, to turn on your cameras and please give Joan and Corey and John a happy wave, just to thank them. Like, since we can't applaud, it's hard to do that, but we want to show our appreciation for this presentation today. And if anyone has further questions, or if you want to reach out to these experts, please contact them directly. And there'll be information provided by us later. And then also you've seen that can be done in the chat as well. And before we close, we want to remind you that we want your feedback and your suggestions for meetings for our Clear Pathways Ohio Collaborative moving forward. Remember, this is an opportunity to take a deep dive into subjects pertaining to the crisis continuum and the aspects that are important, like not overlooking those who are overrepresented and underserved in our system. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ali Fay from our Clear Pathways team to tell you about a little bit more about the College for Behavioral Health Leadership webinar and about a short survey that we want to do and get your input on.
Thanks, Tom. So in the chat, you'll see a couple of things. The first was that I pasted the registration link for the College for Behavioral Health Leadership's webinar. And as Joan kind of talked about, it'll be somewhat similar to this, but they'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into certain things that we didn't get to today. So I encourage everyone to attend that, and please feel free to share that with your networks in case there's anyone who was unable to make it today. The other thing is that we did record this webinar, so we will make available the recording at some point tomorrow, or maybe later today, I will have that email out. So you can also share the recording from today. And then as Tom mentioned, we have a very brief survey that we ask Lunch and Learn attendees to complete. So I pasted that link as well, and it's super short, just 3 questions, but we would love to hear if you have any ideas for upcoming Lunch and Learns. With that, I would just like to thank Joan, Corey, and John again for joining us today. And I will let us all go just a couple of minutes early. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your attendance today, and looking forward to further information that will be released by this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Tom, that was a great question to end it. Nice and exciting.
Very good.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. See y'all later. Thank you.
Yeah,
See y'all later.
nice job, John.
Thank
You
you.
gave some real tangible examples, and I think that really helps people.
I hope so. I have worked in the different levels since I got my MSW at the University of Kentucky starting in 2001. So I've mostly been in Cincinnati area, but now I'm teaching closer to Dayton. So hopefully it's, an experience worth sharing. And
I'm one of the founding members of Ohio Mentor
okay.
that brought it from Massachusetts in the early days.
Okay. Yeah.
So was kind of interested that you had that in your resume.
Right. Yeah. I was like, I want to at least give some like real life that we're not just like the pie in the sky guys where we talk about theory, but like we've had practice and practical application there. So I'm like, can I share some of that? So I was kind of digging deep, but I wish I could have dug deeper. Sometimes you only have what you got right here at the moment. So.
Well, your experience is really relatable, and that a lot of people in this call are people that are doing the work, and so they like to hear that. That hey, you've been where they're at, and that your curiosity has guided you to further how you delve into using data wisely, and we're really trying to encourage smarter use of data and that sort of thing across our Clear Pathways communities.
I meant to answer, but I didn't want to speak too much when you guys asked about some shockers, and it was the passage rate. I think it's only like, well, actually, I think we had in the PowerPoint, but it's very low for like HBCU grads. And then especially for LISWs, it's like 90-10. So CSWE has now since put out a report in the past year about the low passage rate of African Americans. We're trying to change our status here and prepare them for the test starting in not just senior year, but even junior year, and then seeing if we can make an impact and the way the questions are answered. So that was kind of some of the suggestions we're working with.
No, that's very useful. Don't hesitate to share that kind of thing in your next presentation, because I think people really would like to see that. Hey, you were even surprised when you were looking at the data, and hey, what could we be doing to fix some of this stuff? Because really, we should be doing everything in our power to get people that are that close to the finish line across it, so that they can start doing work.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I even think is in the prevention, it actually is 20% diverse. Maybe is it sometimes you get the CDCA and maybe an associate's degree. So it is like the first level of step up licensure. And then as you get up towards LISW, that's where you see the clear disparities. So that's one thing that we can consider. And I will be on next week. I'm not presenting, but I want to try to make it and see you guys all next week too.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nice meeting you.
Yes, very
Hopefully
nice to meet you.
We'll meet in person sometime.
Sounds good. Yes, absolutely. We'll see you
All
soon.
righty.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.